The crystal water glass shattered against the marble floor. 3 seconds later, his fist connected with her face. She was 8 months pregnant, standing at her own dinner table, surrounded by guests who watched in frozen horror. But here's what her millionaire husband didn't know. The butler was recording everything, and he had been recording for 6 months. What Theodore Ashworth thought was a moment of rage was actually his wife's final move in a chess game she had been playing for 11 months. A game that would cost him his freedom, his fortune, and everything he thought he controlled. This is not just a story about betrayal. This is a story about a woman who turned her prison into a trap, who transformed her fear into a weapon, who made her abuser's worst nightmare come true. By the end of this story, you will understand why the most dangerous person in that mansion was not the man with the fists. It was the woman with the plan. The crystal water glass shattered against the marble floor 3 seconds before his fist connected with her face. Eloise Ashworth did not see the blow coming. She heard it first. The crack of his knuckles against her cheekbone, then the taste of copper flooding her mouth. Her lip had split open. Blood dripped onto the white linen tablecloth like red wine spilling in slow motion. She gripped the edge of the mahogany dining table. 8 months pregnant, she refused to fall. Her knees wanted to buckle, her body screamed at her to collapse, but she would not give him that satisfaction. Not tonight, not with witnesses watching. The dining room of the Ashworth estate had never been so silent. 5 people sat frozen around the table. Garrett Holbrook, her husband's business partner, had stopped mid-bite. His fork hovered in the air. His wife Deborah pressed a napkin to her mouth. Her eyes were wide with horror. At the head of the table, Vivian Ashworth, her mother-in-law, simply stared. Not at Ellie, at her son, as if she had seen this before. Theodore Ashworth III stood over his wife. His hand was still raised. His chest heaved with rage. The charming smile he wore for the world had vanished completely. In its place was the monster Ellie had lived with for 5 years. "Did you just correct me, sweetheart?" His voice was ice. "In front of my guests?" Ellie touched her lip. Her fingers came away red. She looked at the blood. Then she looked at Bernie. Bernard Whitmore stood by the sideboard. He had been the Ashworth family butler for 32 years. He was 58 years old. His posture was perfect. His expression was neutral. But his right hand rested on a silver serving tray. And beneath that tray, hidden from everyone's view, his phone was recording. Their eyes met for exactly 1 second. Bernie gave an almost imperceptible nod. Ellie turned back to her husband. "I apologize, Theodore. You were saying the Henderson property closed in March. I was mistaken. It had closed in September." She knew this because that property was part of his hidden assets, the ones he thought she knew nothing about, the ones that would destroy him in court. "That's right." Theodore smoothed his jacket. The charm flickered back into place like a light switch. "I was saying it closed in March. Garrett, you remember the paperwork?" Garrett cleared his throat. "Yes, March. Of course." No one looked at Ellie. No one acknowledged the blood now dripping onto her white maternity dress. No one mentioned the crack that had echoed through the formal dining room. The silence stretched. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked, ticked, ticked. Deborah Holbrook finally broke the tension. "Perhaps we should all take a breath. Ellie, dear, are you all right?" "I'm fine." Ellie's voice was steady. She had practiced that steadiness for years. "I should freshen up. Please excuse me." She walked out of the dining room. Her heels clicked against the marble. Each step sent pain shooting through her swollen feet. Her cheek throbbed. Her lip burned. But she kept walking. Through the hallway lined with oil paintings, past the grand staircase, into the powder room. She locked the door behind her. The mirror showed her exactly what she expected. A red welt forming on her cheekbone. A split lip already swelling. Eyes that had gone hollow years ago. She turned on the cold water, let it run over her trembling hands, pressed a damp towel to her face. Then she smiled. "Finally," she whispered to her reflection. "Finally, I have proof. 11 months of planning, 6 months of secret recordings, countless nights lying awake, waiting for the right moment. And now she had it. Video evidence of Theodore Ashworth III assaulting his 8 months pregnant wife in front of witnesses at his own dinner party. Her divorce lawyer was going to have a field day. The baby kicked, hard. Ellie pressed her hand to her belly. "I know, sweetheart," she murmured. "Mama's scared too, but we're going to be okay. We're going to get out." A soft knock at the door made her freeze. "Mrs. Ashworth?" Bernie's voice low and careful. "May I bring you some ice?" She unlocked the door. Bernie slipped inside. He carried a cloth napkin wrapped around ice cubes. But that was not why he had come. "I got everything," he said quietly. "The glass breaking, the strike, his words, your response, the silence afterward." Ellie took the ice, pressed it to her cheek. The cold was a relief. "Send it to Patricia tonight," she said. "Use the encrypted email." "Already done, Mrs. Ashworth. I sent it from the pantry." Patricia Callahan was the best divorce attorney in the state. She specialized in cases against powerful men. She had been building Ellie's case for 8 months, and now she had the evidence that would win it. "Thank you, Bernie." Ellie's voice cracked, just slightly. "I don't know what I would have done without you." The old butler's eyes softened. "You would have found another way, Mrs. Ashworth. You are stronger than you know." She did not feel strong. She felt exhausted, terrified. 8 months pregnant and bleeding in a powder room while her abuser entertained guests in the next room. But she also felt something something she had not felt in 5 years. Hope. "We should return," Bernie said. "Mr. Ashworth will become suspicious." Ellie nodded. She checked her reflection one more time, straightened her shoulders, composed her face into the mask she wore every day. When she walked back into the dining room, Theodore was laughing, telling a story about a golf game. Garrett was chuckling along. Deborah stared at her plate. Vivian sipped her wine and watched everything. "Darling," Theodore stood when he saw her. Ever the gentleman in public. "I am so sorry about earlier. I don't know what came over me. The stress of the Henderson deal. Please sit down. Let me pour you some water." "Thank you, Theodore." She took her seat. Let him fuss over her. Let him play the repentant husband. The other guests pretended nothing had happened. That was how it worked in their world. You did not acknowledge the ugly things. You did not speak of violence at dinner parties. You smiled and moved on and pretended everything was fine. But things were not fine. And after tonight, they never would be again. Ellie ate her dessert, made small talk about the charity gala next month, complimented Deborah's new earrings, played the perfect hostess despite the blood that had dried on her dress. At 10:30, the guests had finally left. Garrett shook Theodore's hand at the door. Deborah hugged Ellie carefully, avoiding her injured cheek. "Take care of yourself, dear," Deborah whispered. There was something in her voice, something that sounded almost like a warning. Then they were gone. And Ellie was alone with her husband. Theodore closed the front door, locked it, turned to face her. "I hope you learned your lesson tonight," he said. His voice was casual, as if discussing the weather. "I will not be embarrassed in front of my associates." "I understand." Ellie kept her eyes down, submissive. That was what he wanted. "Good." He loosened his tie, headed for the stairs. "I'm going to bed. Try not to disturb me when you come up." She listened to his footsteps fade, heard the bedroom door close. Only then did she exhale. Bernie appeared beside her, silent as always. "The video is with Mrs. Callahan," he confirmed. "She has already responded. She says it is exactly what she needed." Ellie closed her eyes. 11 months of fear, 11 months of planning, 11 months of playing the dutiful wife while secretly building her escape. Tonight was the beginning of the end. She pressed her hand to her belly again. The baby had quieted. "We did it, sweetheart," she whispered. "We did it. Now we just have to survive a little longer." Bernie cleared his throat. "Mrs. Ashworth, there is something else. Mrs. Callahan believes, given the severity of tonight's incident, you should not wait. She wants to file the papers this week." This week? Ellie had expected to wait until after the baby was born, to have more time to prepare. But Patricia was right. After tonight, waiting was dangerous. Theodore had hit her before, but never this hard, never in front of witnesses. He was escalating, and a man who would punch his pregnant wife at a dinner party was a man capable of much worse. "Tell her yes," Ellie said. "File the papers. I'm ready." Bernie nodded. Something that might have been relief crossed his weathered face. I will have everything prepared, Mrs. Ashworth. You will not face this alone. Ellie looked at the butler who had become her unlikely savior. The man who had watched Theodore's father abuse Theodore's mother for years. The man who had stayed silent when Margaret Ashworth died. The man who refused to stay silent again. I know I won't, Bernie. Thank you for everything. She climbed the stairs slowly. Her body ached. Her face throbbed. Her heart pounded with fear and anticipation. In the bedroom, Theodore was already asleep, snoring. His hands still smelled of expensive scotch when she passed by his side of the bed. Ellie lay down carefully, stared at the ceiling, counted the ornate moldings she had once thought were beautiful. Now they looked like prison bars. 11 months ago, everything had changed. When she discovered she was pregnant. When she realized she could not bring a child into this nightmare. Tonight, everything would change again. She placed both hands on her swollen belly, felt her daughter kick, strong, live, fighting, just like her mother. The pregnancy test had 2 pink lines. Ellie sat on the bathroom floor of the Ashworth estate. The cold marble seeped through her silk robe. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the plastic stick. Pregnant. She was pregnant. She should have been happy. She and Theodore had been married for 3.5 years. A baby was the next logical step. The thing that was expected. The thing that would please his mother and silence the questions at charity events. Instead, she was terrified. Because 3 months ago, Theodore had hit her for the first time. She had burned dinner. A stupid mistake. She had been distracted by a phone call from her mother and forgotten to check the roast. The kitchen had filled with smoke. The fire alarm had screamed. Theodore had come home to chaos. And when Ellie apologized when she tried to explain, his hand had whipped across her face before she could finish her sentence. The backhand had sent her stumbling into the counter. Her hip had bruised. Her cheek had stung for days. Afterward, he had cried. Actually cried. Theodore Ashworth III, who never showed weakness, had knelt before her and begged forgiveness. I don't know what happened, he had said. I've been under so much pressure. The deal with Garrett is falling apart. I took it out on you. That was wrong. I am so sorry, Ellie. It will never happen again. She had believed him. God help her. She had believed him. He had bought her a diamond bracelet the next day. 3 carats. To remind you how much I love you, he had said. She still wore it sometimes when he wanted her to, when he needed to show the world what a generous husband he was. But it had happened again. 2 months after the slap, he grabbed her arm during an argument about her mother visiting. His fingers left bruises that lasted 2 weeks. She wore long sleeves to the country club. Told herself it was an accident. He hadn't meant to grip so hard. Then he threw her phone across the room because she was texting Marcy, her best friend from college. The screen shattered. He bought her a new one the next day. What he didn't tell her was that he had installed tracking software. She found it 3 weeks later when the phone started glitching. By then, the man she had married had disappeared completely. In his place was someone cold, controlling, cruel, and now she was pregnant with his child. Ellie stared at those 2 pink lines, felt her stomach turn, not from morning sickness, from fear. What kind of life would her baby have? Growing up in this house, watching their father hurt their mother, learning that love came with bruises and apologies and diamond bracelets. She thought about her own childhood. Her mother, Ruth, had raised her alone after her father left. They had been poor. They had struggled. But Ruth had never let anyone hurt her daughter. Had never let anyone make Ellie feel small or afraid. I was so stupid, Ellie thought. The signs were all there. Marcy tried to warn me. Mom had concerns. But I thought I knew better. I thought Theodore was different. He had seemed different at first. Charming, attentive, wealthy beyond anything Ellie had ever known. He had swept into her life when she was a struggling interior designer, barely making rent. He had taken her to 5-star restaurants and private jets and European vacations. The fairy tale proposal had happened in Paris, on the Eiffel Tower, with a ring that cost more than her mother's house. Everyone had said she was so lucky, so blessed, to catch a man like Theodore Ashworth III. No one saw what happened behind closed doors. The bathroom door rattled. Ellie shoved the pregnancy test into her robe pocket. Ellie? Theodore's voice was impatient. Are you almost done? I need to shower before the board meeting. Just a minute. She flushed the toilet, ran the water, checked her face in the mirror. She looked pale, frightened. She pinched her cheeks, forced a smile, opened the door. Theodore pushed past her without a word. He was already undressing, already focused on his next meeting, his next deal, his next conquest. He did not notice that his wife's world had just tilted on its axis. Ellie went downstairs. Bernie was setting out breakfast in the sunroom. Fresh fruit, croissants, coffee that she suddenly could not stomach. "Good morning, Mrs. Ashworth." Bernie's voice was formal, professional, but his eyes were kind. "May I bring you some tea instead?" She nodded, sank into a chair, stared out at the manicured gardens that she had once loved. Now they felt like the walls of a very beautiful prison. Bernie returned with chamomile tea, set it before her, hesitated. "Mrs. Ashworth," he said quietly, "if I may be so bold, you seem troubled this morning." Ellie looked up at the butler. In 3.5 years of marriage, Bernie had been a constant presence. Always professional, always discreet. She knew almost nothing about him personally, but she had seen the way he watched Theodore sometimes. The flicker of something in his eyes that looked almost like disgust. "I'm fine, Bernie, just tired." He nodded, but he did not leave immediately. Instead, he straightened the silverware that did not need straightening. "I have served this family for 32 years, he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I served Mr. Ashworth Sr. before his passing, and Mrs. Margaret Ashworth before her accident." Ellie's hand tightened on her teacup. Margaret Ashworth, Theodore's mother, who had died from a fall down the stairs when Theodore was 25. "I saw many things in this house, Mrs. Ashworth. Things I wish I had not seen. Things I should have spoken about, but did not." He met her eyes. The kindness there had sharpened into something else, something fierce. "I will not make that mistake again." Then he was gone. Back to the kitchen, back to his duties, as if the conversation had never happened. Ellie sat frozen. Her tea grew cold. Her mind raced. Bernie knew. He knew what Theodore was, what Theodore did, and he was offering something, an alliance, a witness, a way out. But she could not think about that now. She had a more immediate problem. She was pregnant, and she had to decide what to do about it. 2 weeks later, she sat in Dr. Caroline Webb's office for her first prenatal appointment. Dr. Webb was highly recommended, expensive, the kind of doctor wealthy women in the city trusted with their pregnancies. She was also observant. "Mrs. Ashworth," Dr. Webb's voice was gentle, "I noticed some bruising on your wrist during the examination. Would you like to tell me about that?" Ellie's heart stopped. She had forgotten about the bruise. Theodore had grabbed her 2 days ago when she asked about attending her mother's birthday. "I bumped into a door frame," she said. The lie came automatically now. "I'm so clumsy." Dr. Webb did not look convinced, but she did not push. "I understand." She wrote something on her notepad. "Mrs. Ashworth, I want you to know that this office is a safe space. Anything you tell me is confidential. And if you ever need to talk about anything at all, I am here." She handed Ellie a business card. It had her direct line, not the office number, her personal cell phone. "If you ever need to reach me," Dr. Webb said carefully, "for any reason, day or night, please call." Ellie took the card. Her hand was trembling. She tucked it into the lining of her makeup bag where Theodore would never look. "Thank you, Dr. Webb." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I appreciate that." She did not call. Not that day, not that week. She was still telling herself that things would get better, that the pregnancy would change Theodore, that he would become the man she had married. But things did not get better. They got worse. Theodore was furious when she told him about the baby. Not happy, not excited, furious. "I suppose you'll finally be useful for something," he had said. Cold, dismissive, as if she were a piece of equipment that had finally started working. That night, lying in bed while he slept, Ellie made a decision. She would not raise her child in this house. She would not let her baby grow up watching their mother flinch at footsteps. She would not perpetuate this cycle of violence. She was going to get out. She pressed her hand to her still, flat stomach, whispered into the darkness, "I won't let him do this to you. I promise. I'm going to get us out of here, whatever it takes." The next morning, she retrieved Dr. Webb's card from her makeup bag, stared at the number for a long time. Then she put it back. She was not ready yet. She needed a plan. She needed help. But for the first time in 3 years, she had something she had almost forgotten. She had hope. 3 months into her pregnancy, Ellie started planning in earnest. The challenge was enormous. Theodore controlled everything. Their joint bank accounts were in his name. The credit cards were in his name. Her car had GPS tracking that he monitored from his phone. Her new phone had tracking software too. She had no money of her own, no resources, no way to escape without him knowing. She had signed a prenuptial agreement before their wedding. At the time, it had seemed reasonable. Theodore was wealthy, she was not. Of course he wanted to protect his assets. Now that agreement felt like a noose around her neck. If she divorced him, she would get nothing. A small settlement, enough to survive for a few months. Then she would be alone, pregnant, broke, unable to fight him for custody of their child. Theodore would use every resource at his disposal to destroy her. She had seen what he did to business rivals, the lawsuits, the smear campaigns, the systematic dismantling of careers and reputations. She could not fight him alone. She needed help. Bernie found her in the garden one afternoon. She was sitting on the stone bench by the roses, staring at nothing. Her hands were wrapped around her belly. "Mrs. Ashworth." Bernie approached carefully, like he was approaching a frightened animal. "May I speak with you?" She looked up. The butler stood before her. His posture was perfect as always, but there was something different in his expression. A decision had been made. "Of course, Bernie. What is it?" He sat down beside him. The first time in 3 years he had ever done so. The informality of it startled her. "I told you I would not make the same mistake again," he said quietly. "I meant it." Ellie waited. Her heart was pounding. "I served Margaret Ashworth for 15 years, Bernie continued. "She was a kind woman, a gentle woman. She deserved better than what she received." "What do you mean?" Bernie was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. "The official story was that Mrs. Margaret fell down the stairs. A tragic accident. But I was there that night, Mrs. Ashworth. I saw what really happened." The blood drained from Ellie's face. "What did you see?" "I saw Mr. Ashworth Sr. push her." The words hung in the spring air. A bird sang somewhere in the garden. The fountain bubbled peacefully, and Ellie's entire understanding of her husband's family shifted. "Theodore's father murdered his mother?" Bernie nodded slowly. "I was young then, afraid. Mr. Ashworth Sr. threatened me, said he would destroy me if I spoke. I believed him, so I stayed silent. For 30 years I have carried that guilt." His weathered hands trembled. For the first time, Ellie saw the old man beneath the professional facade. "I watched Theodore grow up," Bernie said. "I watched him become his father. The same temper, the same cruelty, the same need to control. I told myself it was not my place to interfere, that I was only a servant." He turned to look at her directly. His eyes were wet. "Then I saw what he did to you, Mrs. Ashworth. The bruises you try to hide, the way you flinch when he raises his voice, and I knew I could not stay silent again." Ellie's own eyes filled with tears. "Bernie, I don't know what to say." "Say that you will let me help you. I have resources, contacts. I can document what he does. I can record evidence. I can help you build a case that will set you free." "Why would you do this? You've served this family for decades. Theodore pays your salary." Bernie smiled sadly. "Theodore pays for my labor, Mrs. Ashworth. He has never earned my loyalty. Margaret Ashworth earned that, and I failed her. I will not fail you." Something broke inside Ellie then. The dam she had built around her emotions crumbled. She began to cry. Not delicate tears. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. Bernie handed her a handkerchief, waited patiently while she wept. When she finally composed herself, she asked the obvious question. "What do we do?" "First, we document everything. I will set up recording devices in the common areas of the house. They will capture his outbursts, his violence, his threats. Nothing in the bedroom or bathroom. That would be inadmissible. But the living room and the dining room and his study, anywhere you might be alone with him where he loses control." "Is that legal?" "We are in a one-party consent state. As long as one person being recorded knows about it, it is legal. You will know. That is enough. Ellie nodded. Her mind was racing. What else? You need a lawyer, someone who specializes in divorcing powerful men, someone who cannot be bought or intimidated. Do you know anyone like that? Bernie almost smiled. I know exactly the person. Her name is Patricia Callahan. My sister works at a medical clinic that Mrs. Callahan has used in the past. I can arrange a meeting. Theodore will think you are attending a prenatal appointment. A prenatal appointment? So simple, so innocent. Theodore would never suspect. Bernie, if he finds out what we're doing, he will not find out. I have kept secrets in this house for 32 years, Mrs. Ashworth. I know how to be invisible. Ellie looked at the man before her, this quiet, unassuming butler who had witnessed decades of horror, who had stayed silent out of fear, who was now risking everything to help her escape. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Seeing you and your child safe will be payment enough. Margaret would have wanted that. I know she would have. They sat together in the garden for a long time, planning, strategizing, building the framework of Ellie's escape. That night, she lay in bed next to Theodore, listened to his breathing, thought about the man he had become, the man he had always been. She had married a monster, the son of a monster, in a house built on secrets and violence. But she was going to tear it all down. 2 weeks later, Ellie sat in Patricia Callahan's office. The meeting had been arranged exactly as Bernie planned. Theodore thought she was seeing Dr. Webb. Instead, Bernie's sister had driven her to a discreet location downtown. Patricia Callahan was not what Ellie had expected. She was in her early 50s, plain-faced, practical. No designer clothes or expensive jewelry, just sharp eyes and sharper questions. Tell me everything, Patricia said. From the beginning, don't leave anything out. So Ellie told her. The slap, the grabbing, the throwing, the isolation from friends and family, the tracking on her phone and car, the controlling of finances, the way Theodore could shift from charming to terrifying in seconds. Patricia listened without interrupting, took careful notes. When Ellie finished, she sat back in her chair. Mrs. Ashworth, what you're describing is textbook domestic abuse. The physical violence is only part of it. The financial control, the isolation, the monitoring, these are all tactics abusers use to keep their victims trapped. Hearing it laid out so clinically was both validating and horrifying. Can you help me? I can, but I need to be honest with you about what we're facing. Patricia pulled out a copy of the prenuptial agreement. This document is ironclad. In a standard divorce, you would walk away with almost nothing. A small settlement, maybe a few $100,000. Against Theodore Ashworth's lawyers, that money would disappear in custody battles within a year. Ellie's heart sank. So there's nothing I can do? I didn't say that. Patricia leaned forward. The prenup has a morality clause. Section 12, paragraph 3. If either party is convicted of a felony during the marriage, the agreement is void. The injured party is entitled to half of all marital assets, half of $200 million. If we can prove domestic violence, Patricia continued, if we can get a conviction, you would be entitled to $100 million, plus primary custody of your child, plus whatever hidden assets we uncover. Hidden assets? Patricia smiled grimly. Men like Theodore always have hidden assets. Shell companies, offshore accounts, real estate and family members' names. We find those, and the numbers get even bigger. Ellie's head was spinning. $100 million. Custody of her baby. Freedom from Theodore forever. What do you need from me? Evidence, documentation, medical records, witness testimony. The more we have, the stronger our case. Can you get me those things? Ellie thought of Bernie, of the recording devices he was preparing, of Dr. Webb's careful documentation. Yes, she said, I can get you everything. Patricia nodded. Good. Then let's get to work. Over the next 2 months, the pieces fell into place. Bernie installed tiny cameras in the living room and dining room, hidden in picture frames and potted plants. They captured Theodore's outbursts, his threats, The time he threw a vase at Ellie's head and missed by inches. Dr. Webb documented every injury, carefully, clinically, creating a paper trail that would hold up in court. And Ellie learned to survive, to play the dutiful wife, to apologize when Theodore raged, to agree when he demanded, to be invisible until she could escape. She also discovered something else. Theodore was planning too. Bernie found the evidence. Financial records hidden in Theodore's study. Shell companies in the Cayman Islands. Real estate in Vivian's name that Theodore had purchased. An account in Switzerland that didn't appear on any tax return. He's moving money, Bernie told her one afternoon. Large sums into accounts you don't have access to. I believe he's planning to leave you with nothing when the baby comes. Ellie stared at the documents. All those numbers, all those betrayals. He knew, she said slowly. He knew this marriage was failing, and he's been preparing to dispose of me. It appears so, Mrs. Ashworth. She should have been devastated. Instead, she felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. He thought he was the smart one. He thought she was just a pretty wife who would do as she was told. He had no idea what she was capable of. Send copies of everything to Patricia, she said, and keep looking. There's probably more. Yes, Mrs. Ashworth. Bernie paused at the door. If I may say so, Mrs. Ashworth. You are handling this remarkably well. Ellie smiled. It was not a nice smile. My husband thinks he's going to destroy me, Bernie. He's wrong. I'm going to destroy him first. The mistress had a name, Savannah Pierce, 29 years old, interior designer. Blonde, beautiful. Working on the Ashworth corporate offices for 8 months. 8 months, the same length of time Ellie had been pregnant. Bernie had found the receipts. Hotel rooms at the Grand Marquis downtown, jewelry from Tiffany's. An apartment lease on the Upper East Side paid for through one of Theodore's shell companies. Theodore had been cheating on her throughout her entire pregnancy. While she was sick with morning sickness, he was with Savannah. While she was going to prenatal appointments, he was buying his girlfriend diamonds. While she was decorating the nursery, he was setting up a love nest. Ellie sat in the guest bedroom that had become her secret planning room. The documents were spread before her. Credit card statements, hotel invoices, the apartment lease with Savannah's name on it. She should have felt devastated, heartbroken, betrayed. Instead, she felt clarity. He was planning our baby's nursery while buying her an apartment. He touched my belly at night and touched her during the day. I was being replaced before I'd even given birth. The rage that had been building for months crystallized into something cold and useful. Not the hot anger that led to mistakes. The cold anger that led to victory. She called Patricia that evening. Theodore was at a business dinner that she now knew meant Savannah's apartment. We have more evidence, she said. He's having an affair. That's useful but not criminal, Patricia replied. However, the apartment paid for through a shell company is financial misconduct. The hidden assets are fraud. We're building a very strong case, Ellie. There's something else I want to do. What's that? I want to meet her, Savannah Pierce. Patricia was silent for a moment. That could be dangerous. If Theodore finds out, he won't. I have a plan. The plan was simple. Bernie would arrange the meeting, a coffee shop in a neighborhood Theodore never visited. Ellie would go alone, and she would turn her husband's mistress into another ally. It was risky. Savannah could be loyal to Theodore. She could tell him about the meeting. She could ruin everything. But Ellie had been watching. Savannah was 29, young, impressionable, probably believing Theodore's lies about his marriage, about his wife, about his intentions. Women like Savannah didn't fall for married men because they were evil. They fell because they were lied to, manipulated, told that the wife was crazy or cold or already out the door. Ellie knew those lies because Theodore had told them to her, about his first girlfriend, about his college sweetheart, about every woman who had come before. Savannah was not the enemy, Theodore was, and Ellie was going to show her the truth. The meeting happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Ellie wore a loose coat that hid her pregnancy. She arrived at the coffee shop early, chose a booth in the back, ordered tea she didn't intend to drink. Savannah Pierce walked in at exactly 2:15. She was even prettier in person, tall, slim, designer clothes that Theodore had probably paid for. She looked nervous, defensive, ready for a confrontation. Ellie stood, extended her hand. "Thank you for coming, Savannah. Please sit down." Savannah hesitated, then slid into the booth across from her. Her eyes darted around the cafe, looking for cameras, for witnesses, for Theodore. "I don't know what you think you're going to accomplish with this," Savannah said. Her voice was sharp but uncertain. "Theodore told me about you, about your mental problems, about how you've been trying to trap him." Ellie almost laughed. Mental problems. Of course, that was the story Theodore would tell. "Let me ask you something, Savannah. Has Theodore ever grabbed you hard enough to leave bruises?" The color drained from Savannah's face. Just for a second. Then the defensive mask returned. "I don't know what you're talking about. Has he ever thrown something at you when he was angry? A phone, a glass, maybe just shoved you into a wall during an argument?" Savannah's hand trembled around her coffee cup. "He told you I was crazy," Ellie continued, "that I was unstable, that our marriage was already over, that he was just staying until, what, until some business deal closed? Until the timing was right?" "He said you were separated." Savannah's voice was quieter now. "That you were staying for the money, that you didn't care about each other anymore." "We're not separated. We've never been separated. I've been living with him, sharing his bed, carrying his child for 8 months. The same 8 months he's been seeing you." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were the medical records, the photographs of bruises, Dr. Webb's careful documentation of injuries. "This is what Theodore does to women he claims to love. This is what he did to me. And in 6 months, when he's tired of you, he'll do the same." Savannah stared at the folder. Her hands shook as she opened it, turned the pages, saw the photographs of Ellie's bruised arms, her swollen face, the medical notes detailing injuries inconsistent with patient's explanation. "I didn't know." Her voice cracked. "He told me you were, he said, he lied. That's what men like Theodore do. They lie, they manipulate, they charm you until you're trapped. Then they show you who they really are." Savannah looked up. Her eyes were wet. "There was another woman before me, wasn't there?" Ellie nodded. "3 others. That I know of. Bernie found evidence of affairs going back 15 years. Theodore's father was the same way. His grandfather, too. Probably. It's a pattern." "Oh, God." Savannah pressed her hands to her face. "Oh, God, I'm such an idiot." "You're not an idiot. You were deceived. There's a difference." They sat in silence for a long moment. Savannah processed. Ellie waited. Finally, Savannah spoke. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing if you don't want to give it. I'm not here to threaten you or make demands. I just wanted you to know the truth." She stood, gathered her purse. "I'm leaving the folder. You can do whatever you want with it. Throw it away, show it to Theodore, or—" She paused, met Savannah's eyes. "Or you can save yourself the way I'm trying to save myself. You have access to things I don't. Financial records, emails, conversations, the evidence of what he's hiding. And if I get that evidence—" Ellie pulled a business card from her purse. "Patricia Callahan's name and number. Call this woman. She can help you too. Whatever Theodore promised you, he won't deliver. Men like him never do. But Patricia can help you protect yourself." She left the card on the table, walked toward the door. "Ellie," Savannah's voice stopped her. "I'm sorry for everything. I really didn't know." Ellie looked back at the young woman. So pretty, so naive, so much like Ellie herself had been 4 years ago. "I know you didn't. That's why I'm here." She walked out of the cafe without looking back, but she left the folder, and she left the card. 2 weeks later, Patricia called with news. "Savannah Pierce reached out to me," the lawyer said. "She has bank statements, emails, proof of the hidden assets that we couldn't find on our own." Ellie closed her eyes, relief washed through her. "She's willing to provide evidence against Theodore? More than that, she's willing to testify if needed. Theodore promised her he would leave you after the baby was born, that they would be together. Now she knows he was lying. The enemy of my enemy is my friend." Ellie had gambled and won. What happens now? Now we have everything we need: medical records, video evidence, financial fraud, witness testimony. All we need is one more thing. "What's that?" Patricia's voice was careful. measured. We need Theodore to commit an act of violence that cannot be denied, something witnessed, something recorded, something that will guarantee a criminal conviction. Ellie's hand moved to her belly. The baby kicked. I think I know how to make that happen. 7.5 months pregnant. The dinner party was 3 weeks away. Ellie planned every detail with military precision. The guest list, the menu, the seating arrangement, the timing of when she would make her move. Theodore had to believe it was his idea. That was crucial. If he suspected she had manipulated the situation, everything would fall apart. So she planted seeds. Darling, I was thinking we haven't entertained in months. She made her voice casual, wifely, boring. People might start to talk. Theodore looked up from his laptop. Talk about what? About us, about the baby, about why we're suddenly so private. She shrugged. You know how the country club wives gossip. I just thought a small dinner party might quiet things down. He considered this. Theodore cared deeply about appearances, about what people thought, about maintaining the image of the perfect, successful businessman with the perfect, beautiful wife. That's not a terrible idea, he admitted. Who would we invite? Garrett and Deborah, of course, and your mother. Just a small, intimate gathering. Theodore nodded slowly. Garrett has been asking about coming over. He wants to discuss the Henderson development. The Henderson development, the property that had closed in September, not March. The property that was part of Theodore's hidden assets. The property he thought Ellie knew nothing about. Perfect, she said sweetly. I'll have Bernie arrange everything. The date was set for the following Saturday. Ellie threw herself into preparations with visible enthusiasm. Theodore was pleased. His wife was finally being useful, finally performing her role properly. He had no idea what she was really preparing. Bernie installed 3 additional cameras in the dining room, tiny, invisible, undetectable. They captured multiple angles. The one on his phone would record audio. The others would provide visual evidence from every direction. Patricia reviewed the plan. It's risky, she said during their phone call. If he doesn't react the way you expect, he will. I know my husband. I know exactly what triggers him. And if he hurts you badly, if something happens to the baby? Ellie's hand pressed against her stomach. The baby was active today, kicking, squirming, fighting. I'll be careful. I'll position myself near the table. If he strikes, I'll brace myself against it. The witnesses will intervene before he can do real damage. You're very brave, Ellie. I'm not brave. I'm desperate. There's a difference. The week before the dinner party, Theodore found out about her meeting with Savannah. Ellie never discovered how. Perhaps Savannah mentioned it to someone. Perhaps one of Theodore's contacts saw them at the cafe. It didn't matter. What mattered was the explosion that followed. Theodore came home from work at 7:15. His footsteps were heavy on the marble. Ellie heard them from the sitting room. Heavy meant danger. She had learned that years ago. She stood, prepared herself. What the hell is wrong with you? He was in the doorway. His face was red. A vein pulsed in his forehead. Theodore, I don't understand. You met with her, with that Pierce woman behind my back. Ellie kept her voice calm, confused, innocent. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed her shoulders, shook her. Someone saw you at a coffee shop downtown, chatting with my interior designer like old friends. Theodore, you're hurting me. His grip tightened. What did you tell her? What lies did you spread? I didn't tell her anything. I was just having coffee. She happened to be there. We exchanged pleasantries. Liar. He shoved her away. She stumbled, caught herself on the arm of the sofa. Her hands went instinctively to her belly. If you embarrass me, Theodore hissed, if you say one word to anyone about our private business, I will destroy you. You'll never see that baby. You'll die homeless and alone. Do you understand me? Yes, her voice was small, submissive, exactly what he wanted. I understand. He stared at her for a long moment. The rage flickered, dimmed. The mask started to slide back into place. Good. Now stop crying and clean yourself up. You look pathetic. He left. His footsteps echoed down the hallway. The door to his study slammed. Ellie sank onto the sofa. Her whole body was shaking. But she wasn't crying, she was thinking. Bernie appeared in the doorway. His phone was in his hand. I recorded everything, he said quietly. Every word, every threat. Send it to Patricia. Add it to the file. Mrs. Ashworth, are you certain about Saturday? He's escalating. The danger. I know the danger, Bernie. She looked up at him. Her eyes were dry, cold, determined. That's exactly why Saturday has to happen. If I don't end this now, he will end me. Bernie nodded slowly. Very well, Mrs. Ashworth. I will be ready. She spent the rest of the week preparing. Not for the dinner party, for its aftermath, a bag packed with essentials hidden in Bernie's car, documents copied and stored with Patricia, a safe house arranged through Bernie's contacts, a burner phone with only 3 numbers programmed, Patricia, Bernie, and Dr. Webb. Theodore noticed nothing. He was distracted by business, by the Henderson deal that was apparently more complicated than expected, by whatever else occupied his mind. He did not notice that his wife was preparing for war. The morning of the dinner party, Ellie woke early. Theodore was already gone. A breakfast meeting, he said. Probably Savannah's apartment. She showered slowly, dressed carefully. The white maternity dress she had chosen was perfect. Pure, innocent. The image of pregnant vulnerability. Bernie had pressed it that morning. His hands had trembled slightly. Are you certain, Mrs. Ashworth? I'm certain, Bernie. Tonight everything changes. She descended the stairs at 5:30. The dining room was immaculate. Fresh flowers, crystal glasses, the good china that was only used for special occasions. 3 cameras hidden in the corners. 1 phone ready to record audio. Witnesses arriving in 2 hours. Ellie sat at the empty table, ran her fingers along the white linen cloth. By midnight, there would be blood on this cloth, her blood. But it would be the last time Theodore ever touched her. She pressed her hand to her belly. The baby was quiet, resting. Just a few more hours, sweetheart, she whispered. Then we're free. The first guest arrived at 7:45. Vivian Ashworth swept into the dining room in a cloud of lavender perfume. She wore diamonds and disapproval in equal measure. Eloise, she air-kissed both of Ellie's cheeks. You look enormous. How much longer until you're due? 5 weeks, Vivian. I was much smaller when I carried Theodore. But then I watched my diet carefully. Ellie smiled, the same smile she had worn for 4 years. Polite, blank, giving nothing away. Garrett and Deborah Holbrook arrived at 8. Garrett was Theodore's oldest business partner. 50 years old. Distinguished gray at his temples. He shook Ellie's hand with practiced courtesy. Deborah was warmer. She hugged Ellie carefully, mindful of the pregnancy. You look beautiful, dear. Pregnancy suits you. Thank you, Deborah. Please come in. Theodore should be down shortly. Theodore appeared at 8:15. He had changed into a fresh suit. His smile was brilliant, charming. The Theodore the world saw at charity galas and board meetings. Garrett, Deborah, thank you for coming. He clasped Garrett's hand, kissed Deborah's cheek. Mother, you look radiant as always. The performance was flawless, as it always was. They moved to the dining room. Bernie served wine. Ellie declined, citing the pregnancy. Theodore drank freely. 1 glass, 2, 3. The conversation flowed. Business ventures, real estate deals, charity committees, the empty chatter of wealthy people with nothing real to say. Ellie played her part. She laughed at Theodore's jokes. She agreed with Vivian's pronouncements. She complimented Deborah's jewelry and listened to Garrett's golf stories. Bernie stood by the sideboard. His hand rested on the silver tray. Beneath it, his phone recorded everything. By 9:30, Theodore was on his 5th glass of wine. His voice was louder, his gestures broader, the careful control starting to slip. Garrett was telling a story about the Henderson property, something about a zoning dispute, a delay in construction. It closed in March, didn't it? Garrett said. I remember because it was right before my daughter's birthday. That's right, Theodore nodded. March. The paperwork was a nightmare. Ellie saw her opening. I thought it was September. Her voice was casual, innocent, just making conversation. The room went quiet. Theodore turned to look at her. Sure, his smile didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. What did you say, sweetheart? The Henderson property. I thought you mentioned it closed in September, but I must be mistaken. She knew she wasn't mistaken. She had seen the documents. The property had closed in September, and it had been purchased through one of Theodore's hidden shell companies, a company that didn't officially exist. If Theodore acknowledged September, he would reveal the shell company to Garrett. If he insisted on March, he would contradict legal documents. Either way, she had exposed a lie. Theodore's smile tightened. It was March, darling. You're confused. Of course, I apologize. You were saying, Garrett? The conversation resumed, but something had changed. Theodore's grip on his wine glass was white-knuckled. His jaw was clenched. Ellie could feel his rage building. She knew the signs. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The next 20 minutes were excruciating. She could see Theodore struggling to maintain composure. Each time she spoke, his eyes narrowed. Each time she smiled, his mouth tightened. By 10, the tension was suffocating. Even the guests felt it. Deborah kept glancing between Theodore and Ellie. Garrett's laugh had become nervous. Even Vivian, usually oblivious, had grown quiet. Dessert was served, a chocolate torte that Ellie couldn't taste. Her hands were steady as she lifted her fork. Her heart was pounding. Theodore emptied his sixth glass of wine, and Ellie made her final move. Theodore, I forgot to mention, I ran into Judge Hendricks at the market yesterday. He asked about the Henderson property. Something about the closing date? It was a lie. She had never met Judge Hendricks, but the name was significant. Hendricks was the judge who had overseen the property transfer. If he was asking questions, something was wrong. Theodore's mask cracked. You spoke to Judge Hendricks? Just briefly. He seemed curious about the timeline. Theodore slammed his wine glass on the table. The crystal stem shattered. Red wine spilled across the white linen like blood. Did you just correct me, sweetheart? His voice was ice. In front of my guests? Ellie opened her mouth to respond. His fist connected with her face. The force of the blow snapped her head to the side. She tasted blood. Her lip had split open. Pain exploded across her cheekbone, but she did not fall. 8 months pregnant, she gripped the table edge. She refused to fall. The silence that followed was absolute. Deborah gasped. Garrett froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. Vivian's wine glass stopped midway to her lips, and Bernie, stationed by the sideboard, held his phone steady, recording every second. Theodore, Garrett's voice was strangled. That's enough. But Theodore wasn't listening. The mask was gone. Only the monster remained. He grabbed Ellie's arm, yanked her from her chair, dragged her toward the doorway. If you think you can embarrass me, he snarled, you're even stupider than I thought. He threw her toward the stairs. She caught herself on the banister, her hands wrapped around the polished wood, her belly pressed against the railing. One more push, one more shove, and she would fall. Deborah screamed, "Someone call 911!" Theodore froze. Reality crashed back into his eyes. He looked at his wife, at the blood on her face, at the witnesses staring in horror. This is a private matter. His voice was hoarse. Everyone needs to calm down. No, Garrett stood. His face was pale. Deborah, make the call. Deborah already had her phone out. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was clear. I need an ambulance and police. There's been an assault. Theodore lunged toward her. Garrett stepped between them. Don't, Theodore. Just don't. For a moment, Ellie thought Theodore would hit Garrett too. His fists were clenched. His whole body trembled with rage. Then something in his eyes shifted. The businessman took over, calculating, assessing, recognizing that he had lost. Fine. He smoothed his jacket, tried to reassemble the mask. It was a misunderstanding. Ellie provoked me. She'll tell you. He turned to his wife. His smile was back. Charming, reasonable. Tell them, sweetheart. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Ellie straightened. Blood dripped from her lip onto her white dress. Her hand cradled her belly. No, her voice was clear, strong. It wasn't a misunderstanding. You hit me, in front of witnesses, and everything is on video. Theodore's face went white. Bernie stepped forward. His phone was in his hand. I have recorded the entire evening, Mr. Ashworth. Every word, every action. The footage has already been transmitted to Mrs. Ashworth's attorney. The sound of sirens approached in the distance. Theodore looked at his wife, at his butler, at the guests who would testify against him. You set me up. His voice was barely a whisper. This whole thing was a trap. Ellie smiled. It was not a nice smile. Yes, Theodore, it was. And you walked right into it. The sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. Then a sharp pain shot through Ellie's abdomen. She gasped, doubled over. Ellie? Deborah rushed to her side. Ellie, what's wrong? Another contraction, stronger, more urgent. The baby. Ellie's voice cracked. The baby's coming. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and fluorescent lights. Ellie lay on the stretcher. Contractions tore through her body in relentless waves. Too fast, too strong. 8 weeks early, a young paramedic held her hand. His name tag said Ryan. He had kind eyes. You're going to be okay, Ryan said. Both of you. Just breathe. Ellie breathed, in and out, but her mind was elsewhere. Theodore was being arrested. She had seen the handcuffs through the ambulance doors before they closed. Garrett was giving a statement to the police. Bernie had handed over his phone with the video evidence. Everything she had planned was happening. But she had never expected this. Premature labor, triggered by trauma, by fear, by a blow from her husband that had sent her body into crisis. If her baby didn't survive, none of it mattered. The money, the freedom, the victory, none of it meant anything if Charlotte died. Charlotte, she had chosen the name months ago, after Theodore's grandmother. A peace offering to Vivian. A strategic move in her careful game. Now it was just a name. A hope. A prayer. The hospital rushed toward them. Bright lights, automatic doors, nurses in scrubs running alongside the stretcher. She's 8 months pregnant, Ryan called out. Premature labor triggered by assault. She's also got facial contusions, split lip, possible cheekbone fracture. They wheeled her into a room. Machines beeped. Voices shouted instructions. Someone started an IV. Someone else attached monitors to her belly. Dr. Webb appeared. Her calm face was a lifeline in the chaos. Ellie, I'm here. You're at St. Mary's. We're going to take care of you. The baby. Ellie grabbed Dr. Webb's hand. Please, save my baby. We're going to do everything we can, but I need you to stay calm. Your blood pressure is through the roof. Stress is making the contractions worse. Stay calm. Her husband had just punched her in the face. She was in premature labor. She might lose her daughter. How was she supposed to stay calm? Another contraction hit. She screamed. The pain was unbearable, worse than anything Theodore had ever done to her. She's at 8 centimeters, someone said. We need to prep for delivery. It's too fast, Dr. Webb replied. The baby's heart rate is dropping. We need to do an emergency C-section. Everything happened quickly after that. Consent forms signed with shaking hands. A surgical gown. A cold operating room. Faces covered with masks looking down at her. You're going to feel some pressure, the anesthesiologist said. Then you'll feel nothing below your chest. The numbness spread. Ellie stared at the ceiling. The fluorescent lights blurred through her tears. This was supposed to be a moment of joy. The birth of her first child. Instead, she was alone. Beaten. Terrified. Her mother was hundreds of miles away. Her best friend hadn't spoken to her in years. Her husband was in a jail cell. She had never felt so alone in her life. I might die, she thought. My baby might die. And he wins. After everything, Theodore wins. The thought was unbearable. We're delivering now, Dr. Webb said. You'll feel some tugging. Ellie felt nothing, just pressure. The doctors worked behind the blue curtain. Minutes passed, hours. Time lost all meaning. Then a cry, a thin, reedy cry, the most beautiful sound Ellie had ever heard. She's out, Dr. Webb announced. She's alive. Ellie tried to sit up, couldn't move. The anesthesia held her in place. Is she okay, please? Is my baby okay? A nurse appeared with a tiny bundle, so small, so fragile, pink skin and dark hair and eyes squeezed shut. 4 pounds, 6 ounces, the nurse said. She's small, but she's fighting, just like her mama. Ellie looked at her daughter, at this tiny person she had protected for 8 months, through the beatings, through the fear, through the planning and scheming and desperate hoping. Charlotte Ruth Ashworth, born 5 weeks early, born in chaos and trauma, but alive, breathing, fighting. Ellie started to cry, not from pain this time, from relief so profound it felt like drowning. Can I hold her? Just for a moment. She needs to go to the NICU, but she's stable. She's going to be fine. They placed Charlotte in Ellie's arms. She was so light, like holding a whisper. Hi, baby, Ellie whispered. I'm your mama. I'm so sorry for everything. But we made it. We got out. Charlotte opened her eyes, blue, like her father's. But there was nothing of Theodore in that gaze. Just innocence. Just possibility. A nurse gently took the baby. We'll bring her back as soon as she's settled. You need to rest now. Rest. Ellie almost laughed. She had just escaped a monster, given birth by emergency surgery, had her face smashed in by her husband. But her daughter was alive, and Theodore was in jail. And Bernie had the video that would destroy him. For the first time in 5 years, Ellie let herself believe it. She was going to be okay. They both were. The anesthesia pulled her under. The fluorescent lights faded. The beeping machines grew distant. Her last thought before unconsciousness was simple. We won. She woke alone. The hospital room was quiet. Gray morning light filtered through the blinds. Machines beeped steadily. Her abdomen ached where they had cut her open. She was alive. She had survived. But the room was empty. Her arms were empty. Panic seized her. Charlotte? Her voice cracked. Where's my baby? A nurse appeared immediately. Calm, professional. Mrs. Ashworth, you're awake. Charlotte is in the NICU. She's doing well. Would you like to see her? Ellie nodded frantically, tried to sit up. Pain shot through her incision. Carefully, the nurse said. You just had major surgery. Let me help you. They wheeled her to the NICU in a wheelchair. The hallways were long and sterile. Other patients passed by. Other families with their own crises. None of them knew what Ellie had endured. None of them could see the bruises hidden beneath her hospital gown. The NICU was filled with incubators. Tiny babies. Tiny lives fighting for every breath. Ellie had never seen anything so heartbreaking and hopeful at the same time. Charlotte was in the third incubator. She wore a tiny diaper and a knit cap. Wires connected her to monitors. But her chest rose and fell steadily. Her tiny fists curled and uncurled. She's beautiful, the nurse said. Strong vital signs. She's a fighter. Ellie pressed her hand against the incubator glass. Her daughter's hand was smaller than her thumb. I'm here, Charlotte, she whispered. Mama's here. I'm not going anywhere. She sat with her daughter for hours, watching her breathe, watching her sleep, memorizing every detail of her tiny face. This was what she had fought for. This was what she had risked everything to protect, a small life, a new beginning, a chance to break the cycle of violence. Bernie found her in the late afternoon. He carried a package wrapped in brown paper. Mrs. Ashworth. His voice was gentle. You should be resting. I can't leave her. I understand. He set the package on her lap. This is from Mrs. Callahan. Everything you need is inside. A new phone, yes. The key to the safe house, instructions for what comes next. Ellie looked at the package, at the butler who had saved her life. Thank you, Bernie, for everything. We are not finished yet, Mrs. Ashworth. Mr. Ashworth posted bail this morning. The restraining order is in place, but he is a dangerous man. You cannot return to the estate. I know. The safe house is ready. As soon as you and Charlotte are discharged, I will take you there myself. A safe house, a new phone, a restraining order, a divorce case that was now guaranteed to succeed. Ellie had won. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. What about you, Bernie? Theodore will know you helped me. He'll destroy you. Bernie smiled sadly. I am an old man, Mrs. Ashworth. I have served terrible people for too long. Whatever Mr. Ashworth does to me is a small price for finally doing the right thing. She reached out, took his weathered hand. I won't let him hurt you, Bernie. When this is over, you'll be taken care of. I promise. You don't owe me anything, Mrs. Ashworth. Seeing you and Charlotte safe is all I need. They sat together in the NICU, watching Charlotte breathe, watching her fight. Two survivors, two witnesses, two people who had chosen courage over silence. Tomorrow the battle would continue. Lawyers and courtrooms and the slow machinery of justice. But today, in this quiet room surrounded by tiny lives and beeping machines, Ellie allowed herself to feel something she had almost forgotten: peace. The safe house was a small apartment above a bakery in a neighborhood Theodore had never visited. Bernie drove Ellie and Charlotte there 3 days after the birth. The car wound through unfamiliar streets, past shops and restaurants, and people living ordinary lives. Ellie held Charlotte close. The baby slept against her chest. So small, so trusting. The apartment was clean and simple. 2 rooms, a kitchen, a bathroom. Nothing like the Ashworth estate with its marble floors and crystal chandeliers. It was perfect. The rent is paid for 6 months, Bernie explained. Mrs. Callahan arranged everything. Groceries will be delivered weekly. No one knows you are here. Ellie walked through the room slowly, touched the second-hand furniture, looked out the window at the street below. This was freedom, not luxury, not wealth, just safety. That first night she couldn't sleep. Charlotte was in a bassinet beside the bed, borrowed from Bernie's sister. The sheets smelled like lavender. The radiator clanked softly. Every sound made Ellie jump, every creak of the floor, every car passing on the street below. She checked the lock 7 times, looked out the window every hour, listened for footsteps that never came. She had spent 5 years living with a monster, learning to read his moods, learning to predict his violence. That fear didn't disappear just because she was physically safe. She lay awake until dawn, watching Charlotte breathe, counting the shadows on the ceiling. But she also felt something else, something fragile and unfamiliar. Relief. For the first time in 5 years, no one would hit her. No one would grab her. No one would throw things at her head. She was free, broken and bruised and exhausted, but free. The first week passed slowly. Patricia came by twice. She brought documents to sign, updates on the case, news about Theodore. He's claiming self-defense, Patricia said. Says you provoked him. That you attacked him first and he was just protecting himself. Ellie laughed bitterly. I was 8 months pregnant. I weigh 140 pounds. He weighs 220. Who's going to believe that? No one. We have the video, we have medical records, we have witness statements from Garrett and Deborah. His defense is desperate. What about the prenup? The morality clause is triggered by the felony charges. Even if he pleads down, even if he avoids prison, the clause still applies. You're entitled to half of everything. Half of everything. It still didn't feel real. And the hidden assets? Patricia smiled. Savannah came through. The Swiss accounts, the shell companies, the real estate in his mother's name. It's all documented. Combined with what Bernie found, Theodore's net worth is actually closer to $300 million than $200 million. Half of that is yours. $150 million. Ellie had grown up counting pennies. Now she would have more money than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. But it wasn't about the money. It had never been about the money. It was about Charlotte, about giving her daughter a life free from violence, a future without fear. The second week brought an unexpected visitor. Ellie was feeding Charlotte when the doorbell rang. Bernie checked before opening. Then he smiled, actually smiled. Mrs. Ashworth, there is someone here to see you. Vivian Ashworth stood in the doorway. Ellie's first instinct was fear. This was Theodore's mother, his enabler, the woman who had dismissed and belittled Ellie for 4 years. But Vivian looked different, smaller somehow, older. The diamonds and disapproval were gone. In their place was something that might have been shame. May I come in? Ellie hesitated, then nodded. Vivian entered the small apartment, looked around at the modest furniture, the baby bottles on the counter, the laundry drying on a rack. I know what you must think of me, Vivian said, and you're right to think it. Why are you here, Vivian? The older woman sat down heavily. She looked exhausted, as if she hadn't slept in days. I know what my son is, she said quietly. I've always known, because his father was the same way. Ellie said nothing, waited. Harold hit me for 30 years, started on our wedding night, never stopped until the day he died. Vivian's voice was flat, emotionless, as if reciting facts from a history book. I told myself it was normal, that all husbands were like that. that I just needed to be a better wife. I'm sorry, Vivian, but that doesn't excuse. I know. Nothing excuses what I allowed to happen to you, to the women before you, to, she paused, swallowed hard, to Margaret. Ellie's breath caught. You know about Margaret? I suspected for years. Harold was drunk that night, raging about something Margaret had done. I heard the argument, then the fall, then the silence. Vivian's hands trembled. I chose not to see, just like I chose not to see what Theodore was doing to you. The confession hung in the air. 2 generations of violence, 2 generations of silence. Why are you telling me this now? Vivian reached into her purse, pulled out a flash drive. This contains 30 years of financial records. Every asset Harold and Theodore have hidden. Every shell company, every offshore account, every piece of real estate they thought no one knew about. Ellie stared at the flash drive. You're betraying your own son. My son is a monster, just like his father. And I helped create that monster by staying silent, by looking away, by pretending everything was fine. Vivian's eyes were wet. I won't do it anymore. I can't undo 30 years of cowardice, but I can do this. She held out the flash drive. Take it, use it. Make Theodore pay for what he's done. And maybe that will make up for some of what I failed to do. Ellie took the flash drive. It weighed almost nothing, but it contained the power to destroy the Ashworth Empire. Thank you, Vivian. The older woman stood, straightened her coat, tried to reassemble the dignity she had worn like armor for so long. I don't deserve your thanks. I deserve your hatred. She looked at Charlotte, sleeping peacefully in her bassinet. Take care of that baby. Give her a better life than I gave my son. Break this cycle before it breaks anyone else. She left without another word. Bernie closed the door behind her. Ellie sat holding the flash drive, thinking about cycles, about patterns, about the violence that passed from generation to generation. Theodore's grandfather had probably hit his wife. His father had killed his mother. Theodore had beaten Ellie. But it ended here. It ended now. Charlotte would never learn that love came with bruises, would never flinch at footsteps, would never count the minutes until her father's rage passed. Ellie would make sure of that. She sent the flash drive to Patricia that afternoon. The lawyer called back within the hour. This is incredible, Patricia said. There's evidence of tax fraud, money laundering, securities violations. Theodore isn't just looking at assault charges anymore. He's looking at federal prison. How long? Years, possibly decades. And with this evidence, the prenup becomes almost irrelevant. Between the domestic violence and the financial crimes, you could walk away with everything. Everything. The word echoed in Ellie's mind. She looked around the small apartment, at her daughter sleeping peacefully, at the simple life she had built in 3 weeks. She didn't need everything. She just needed enough. Enough to raise Charlotte, enough to start over, enough to never be afraid again. Patricia, I don't want to drag this out. I don't want years of court battles. What's the fastest way to end this? A plea deal. Theodore pleads guilty to the assault charges, accepts the dissolution of the prenup, walks away with whatever assets we agree to let him keep. Will he take it? After he sees what his mother gave us, he won't have a choice. Ellie nodded to herself. The end was in sight. Make the offer. Let's finish this. The courthouse stood at the corner of Main Street and Justice Avenue. Ellie found that fitting. Justice Avenue, as if the universe had arranged everything perfectly for this moment. She arrived at 8:30 on the first day of trial. The morning was crisp. October wind tugged at her navy blue coat. Reporters gathered on the steps like vultures waiting for carry-on. Patricia met her at the side entrance. A security detail flanked them both. 2 former police officers that Patricia had hired specifically for this trial. Are you ready? Patricia asked. No. Ellie adjusted her simple pearl earrings, the only jewelry she wore. But I'm going anyway. The courtroom was already filling when they entered. Reporters in the back rows, curious spectators who had lined up since dawn. A few familiar faces scattered throughout. Garrett Holbrook sat in the 3rd row. He nodded at Ellie when their eyes met. Not a smile, just acknowledgement. He had aged 10 years in the past 6 months. Deborah sat beside him. Her hand gripped her husband's arm. She looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Vivian Ashworth was there too, in the very last row, dressed in black as if attending a funeral. Perhaps she was. Theodore entered through a side door at 9:15. Ellie hadn't seen him since the night of the dinner party. 6 months of restraining orders and legal proceedings had kept them apart. He looked diminished somehow, thinner, paler. The expensive suit hung loose on his frame. The confident swagger was gone. But when his eyes found Ellie across the courtroom, the hatred was still there. Burning, undiminished. She held his gaze, did not look away. I am not afraid of you anymore, she thought. You have no power over me. Theodore looked away first. The judge entered, the Honorable Margaret Chen, 63 years old, known for her strict adherence to procedure and her intolerance for theatrics. All rise. The courtroom stood. The ritual began. The State versus Theodore Ashworth III, case number 7429. The defendant is charged with assault in the second degree, domestic violence, and child endangerment. How does the defendant plead? Theodore's lawyer stood. James Whitfield, the most expensive defense attorney in the state. Theodore had paid him $500,000 to make this go away. Not guilty, Your Honor. The words hit Ellie like a physical blow. Not guilty. After everything, after the video, after the witnesses, after the medical records, he was going to fight. Patricia had warned her this might happen. Theodore's ego wouldn't allow him to plead guilty, to admit fault, to accept that he had been caught. But hearing those words in the courtroom made it real. This was going to be a war. The prosecution began with opening statements. Assistant District Attorney Rachel Morrison laid out the case methodically. The evidence will show that Theodore Ashworth III engaged in a pattern of systematic abuse against his wife. The evidence will show that on the night of September 14th, he struck his 8 months pregnant wife in the face in front of 5 witnesses. The evidence will show that his assault triggered premature labor, endangering the life of his unborn child. She paused, looked at the jury. The evidence will show that this was not an isolated incident. It was the culmination of years of violence. And thanks to the courage of his victim and the diligence of a witness who could no longer stay silent, we have irrefutable proof. The defense countered with predictable arguments. Theodore was a respected businessman, a pillar of the community, a man under tremendous stress who had made a single mistake. My client is not a monster, Whitfield declared. He is a human being who lost control for a moment he deeply regrets. The prosecution wants you to believe this was a pattern, but the evidence will show otherwise. Ellie listened to the lies with a calm she didn't know she possessed. She had heard them all before. Every excuse, every justification, every attempt to minimize what Theodore had done. But this time, the truth would win. The first witness was Bernard Whitmore. Bernie walked to the stand with the dignity of a man who had finally found peace. He wore his best suit, the one he saved for special occasions. Please state your name and occupation for the record. Bernard James Whitmore. I was employed as butler for the Ashworth family for 32 years. And in that capacity, did you have occasion to observe the defendant's behavior toward his wife? Yes. I observed many incidents of verbal and physical abuse over the course of their marriage. The prosecution guided Bernie through his testimony with careful precision. The incidents he had witnessed, the bruises he had seen, the sounds of violence he had heard through closed doors. Mr. Whitmore, why did you begin recording these incidents? Bernie's answer was slow, measured, heavy with decades of guilt. Because I failed to act once before. When I was a young man, I witnessed Theodore's father assault his mother. I saw things I should have reported. But I was afraid. I was a servant. I had no power. So I stayed silent. He paused. His weathered hands gripped the witness stand. When Margaret Ashworth died, I told myself it was an accident, that I hadn't seen what I knew I had seen. I carried that lie for 30 years. What did you see, Mr. Whitmore? Whitfield jumped up. Objection. Relevance. This trial is about the defendant, not his deceased father. Judge Chen considered. I'll allow it. The witness may answer. Bernie looked at the jury. 12 strangers who would decide Theodore's fate. I saw Harold Ashworth push his wife down the stairs. I watched her fall. I heard her neck break when she hit the bottom. The courtroom erupted. Reporters scribbled frantically. Spectators gasped. Even the judge looked shaken. Order. Judge Chen banged her gavel. Order in the court. When silence returned, Bernie continued. I should have spoken then. I should have gone to the police. But Harold Ashworth threatened me. He said he would destroy me if I ever told anyone. So I kept quiet. I let a murderer go free. His voice cracked. When I saw Theodore doing the same things to Ellie, I knew I couldn't stay silent again. I couldn't watch another woman die in that house. So I started recording. Every incident, every threat, every act of violence. And on the night of September 14th, were you recording? Yes. I positioned myself by the sideboard with my phone hidden beneath a silver tray. I recorded the entire evening. The prosecution introduced the video as evidence. Exhibit A, the cornerstone of their case. But that would come later. First, they needed to establish the pattern. Day 2 brought Dr. Caroline Webb to the stand. The doctor testified for 3 hours. She described every injury she had documented, every lie Ellie had told to explain the bruises, every note she had made in her careful medical records. Dr. Webb, in your professional opinion, were these injuries consistent with the explanations Mrs. Ashworth provided? No, they were not. Can you elaborate? Dr. Webb turned to face the jury. Her voice was calm but firm. Mrs. Ashworth told me she walked into a door. She told me she fell downstairs. She told me she bumped into furniture. But the pattern of injuries was inconsistent with those explanations. She pulled up photographs on the courtroom display. Ellie looked away. She had lived those bruises. She didn't need to see them again. The bruising on her upper arm showed a clear grip pattern. 4 fingers on one side, thumb on the other. That pattern is consistent with someone grabbing her forcefully. More photographs. The contusion on her cheek showed a distinct handprint. Again, inconsistent with walking into a door. More photographs. The injury to her ribs showed impact trauma, the kind you see in car accidents or physical assaults, not from bumping into furniture. Dr. Webb looked at Theodore. Her expression was controlled, but her eyes were cold. In my 20 years of practice, I have seen hundreds of cases like this. Women who lie to protect their abusers, who make excuses, who blame themselves. Mrs. Ashworth's injuries were classic presentations of intimate partner violence. There is no other reasonable explanation. The defense tried to discredit her on cross-examination, suggested she was biased, that she saw abuse where none existed, that she had a political agenda. Dr. Webb remained unshakable. I document what I see, Mr. Whitfield. I let the evidence speak for itself, and the evidence in this case is overwhelming. Day 3 brought Savannah Pierce. She testified via video deposition from an undisclosed location. Theodore's former mistress was terrified. Ellie could see it in the way she fidgeted, the way her eyes darted off camera, but she testified anyway. Ms. Pierce, how did you meet the defendant? I was hired to redesign the offices for Ashworth Development. Theodore and I began an affair about 8 months before his wife gave birth. Did the defendant ever discuss his marriage with you? Yes, he told me his marriage was over, that he and Ellie were separated, that she was only staying for the money. Was that true? No, Savannah's voice wavered. I found out later that they were still living together, sharing a bedroom, that Ellie was pregnant with his child the entire time we were seeing each other. How did you find out the truth? Ellie contacted me. She asked to meet. I thought she was going to confront me, but instead she showed me evidence. Medical records, photographs, documentation of what Theodore had done to her. Savannah wiped her eyes. I had no idea. He was always so charming, so gentle with me. I never imagined he was capable of violence. And after you saw this evidence, what did you do? I ended the relationship immediately. I gathered whatever financial documents I could access, bank statements, emails, evidence of hidden assets, and I gave everything to his wife's attorney. The defense tried to paint Savannah as a scorned woman seeking revenge, a liar trying to hurt the man who had rejected him or her. It didn't work. The jury had seen the photographs. They had heard Bernie's testimony. They knew what Theodore was. Day 4 brought Garrett and Deborah Holbrook. Garrett testified first. His discomfort was palpable. This was his business partner, his friend, the man he had trusted for 20 years. Mr. Holbrook, please describe what you witnessed at the dinner party on September 14th. Garrett swallowed hard. We were having dessert. The conversation turned to the Henderson property. Theodore said it had closed in March. Ellie, Mrs. Ashworth, said she thought it was September. And then Theodore became very angry. His face changed. He asked if she was correcting him. His voice was cold, threatening. What happened next? Garrett closed his eyes. The memory was clearly painful. He hit her, punched her in the face. She was 8 months pregnant, and he punched her in the face. The courtroom was silent. What did you do? I froze. Garrett's voice was barely a whisper. God help me, I froze. I watched him grab her, drag her from the table, throw her toward the stairs, and I didn't move. Tears streamed down his face. Deborah finally snapped me out of it. She screamed for someone to call 911. Only then did I stand up. Only then did I try to stop him. Why didn't you act sooner? Because I was a coward. Garrett looked at Theodore, at the man he had called a friend. Because I had suspected for years and never said anything. Because it was easier to pretend everything was fine than to confront the truth. He turned to the jury. I will never forgive myself for those seconds I hesitated. But I am here now, telling the truth. Theodore Ashworth assaulted his pregnant wife in front of me. That is what I saw. That is what happened. Deborah's testimony was equally damning. She described the shock, the horror, the moment she grabbed her phone and called for help. Did you have any doubt about what you saw? The prosecutor asked. None. Theodore hit Ellie with a closed fist. There was blood on her face. She was holding her belly, trying to protect her baby. It was the most horrifying thing I have ever witnessed. Day 5 was the video. The courtroom fell silent as the recording began to play. Ellie watched herself on the screen. The white dress, the pregnant belly, the careful smile as she made conversation with the guests. She watched Theodore's face change when she corrected him, the mask slipping, the monster emerging. She watched his fist connect with her face, watched herself grip the table, watched the blood drip onto her white dress. The silence in the recording was worse than any scream. 5 people frozen, no one moving, no one speaking. Then Theodore's voice, ice cold. If you embarrass me, I will destroy you. The video showed everything. The grabbing, the dragging, the throwing, Deborah's scream, Garrett finally standing up. And then Ellie's voice, clear and calm despite everything. No, it wasn't a misunderstanding. You hit me, in front of witnesses. And everything is on video. The video ended. The jury stared at Theodore with undisguised contempt. Several of them were crying. One woman looked like she might be sick. The defense had no response. What could they say? The evidence was irrefutable. Day 6 through day 10 focused on the financial crimes, the hidden assets, the shell companies, the tax fraud, the evidence that Vivian had provided. This wasn't directly related to the assault charges, but it painted a picture of who Theodore really was. A man who lied, who cheated, who hid his true nature beneath a charming facade. The jury needed to see the whole picture. They needed to understand that the violence wasn't an aberration. It was part of a pattern. Day 11 through day 14 was the defense's turn. Whitfield called character witnesses. Business associates who praised Theodore's generosity. Country club members who described his charm. Even a former mayor who had received campaign donations from Ashworth Development. None of them had seen what happened behind closed doors. None of them knew the real Theodore. The defense also called a psychologist, Dr. Robert Harmon. He testified that Theodore was under extreme stress at the time of the incident, that the assault was an isolated event, not indicative of a pattern. In your professional opinion, Dr. Harmon, is Mr. Ashworth a danger to others? No, I believe this was a singular lapse in judgment triggered by extraordinary circumstances. With proper treatment, Mr. Ashworth poses no threat. The prosecution demolished him on cross-examination. Dr. Harmon, did you review the medical records documenting 18 months of injuries to Mrs. Ashworth? Yes. And you still believe this was an isolated incident? The injuries documented could have multiple explanations. Dr. Harmon, did you watch the video of Mr. Ashworth punching his pregnant wife? Yes. Did that look like a man acting in self-defense? The video shows a momentary loss of control. Did Mr. Ashworth appear to be in any danger from his pregnant wife when he struck her? Silence. No, he did not. No further questions. Day 15 was Ellie's testimony. She had prepared for weeks, rehearsed with Patricia, practiced staying calm no matter what questions were asked. But nothing could truly prepare her for facing Theodore across that courtroom. She walked to the stand in her simple navy dress, no makeup to hide her face, no jewelry except the pearl earrings her mother had given her. The prosecutor guided her through the story gently. The courtship, the wedding, the first slap. Why didn't you report the abuse to the police? Because I loved him, because I believed he would change, because he apologized every time and promised it would never happen again. But it did happen again. Yes, it escalated. Slaps became punches. Punches became throws. By the time I realized how bad it was, I was already trapped. Trapped how? Ellie looked at the jury, 12 strangers who would decide her future. Theodore controlled everything. The money, the credit cards, my phone, my curriculum. He had isolated me from my friends and family. I had no resources, no support. I was completely dependent on him. What changed? I got pregnant. Her voice wavered slushiton. I realized I couldn't bring a child into that house. I couldn't let my daughter grow up watching her mother get beaten. So I started planning. Planning what? My escape. I found allies. Bernie, DeWebb, a lawyer who specialized in cases like mine. We started gathering evidence, building a case. And the dinner party? Ellie took a deep breath. I knew Theodore would lose control if I challenged him publicly. I knew Bernie would be recording. I knew it was the only way to get evidence that couldn't be explained away. And so you deliberately provoked him? I created conditions where his true nature would be exposed. Everything he did that night, he chose to do. The defense cross-examination was brutal. Whitfield attacked her credibility, her motives, her character. Mrs. Ashworth, isn't it true that you stand to gain over $100 million if my client is convicted? The prenuptial agreement has a morality clause. If Theodore is convicted of a felony, I'm entitled to half of the marital assets. Yes. So you have significant financial motivation to lie? I have significant financial motivation to tell the truth. The truth will set me free. The truth will protect my daughter. The truth is all I have. Isn't it true that you manipulated the situation to manufacture evidence against my client? I exposed the truth. There's a difference. You admit that you planned the dinner party specifically to provoke an assault? Ellie looked at Whitfield calmly. I planned the dinner party to create a situation where my husband's true nature would be revealed. I didn't make him hit me. I didn't force his hand. He chose violence. He has always chosen violence. I just made sure there were witnesses. You don't deny that you manipulated the situation? I survived. Her voice was steady, strong. I protected my daughter. If exposing my husband's violence is manipulation, then yes, I manipulated, and I would do it again. Whitfield had no more questions. The closing arguments stretched over 2 days. The prosecution was methodical. They walked through every piece of evidence, every witness, every photograph and medical record and financial document. Theodore Ashworth is not the man he pretends to be, Rachel Morrison concluded. Behind the charming smile and the expensive suits is a violent abuser who terrorized his wife for years. The evidence is overwhelming. The testimony is consistent. The video speaks for itself. She pointed at Theodore. This man punched his 8 months pregnant wife in the face. He threw her toward the stairs. He triggered premature labor that almost killed his own child. And now his lawyers want you to believe it was just a misunderstanding? She turned to the jury. Don't let him escape justice. Don't let him walk free to find another victim. Hold him accountable for what he has done. The defense pleaded for mercy, for context, for understanding. My client made a terrible mistake, Whitfield admitted, but a mistake is not a pattern. A moment of anger is not a criminal enterprise. The prosecution wants you to believe Theodore Ashworth is a monster. But monsters don't run successful businesses. Monsters don't donate to charity. Monsters don't have friends who speak of their kindness. He spread his hands. Was Theodore wrong to strike his wife? Absolutely. Does he deserve punishment? Perhaps. But he does not deserve to be treated as a violent criminal for a single moment of lost control. The jury retired to deliberate at 4:30 on the afternoon of day 17. Ellie waited in a conference room with Patricia. Bernie sat in the corner, silent, watchful. How long do you think? Ellie asked. Hard to say. Could be hours, could be days. It was 4 hours. At 8:45, the bailiff announced that the jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom filled quickly. Reporters, spectators, everyone who had followed the trial. Ellie took her seat. Her heart pounded, her hands trembled. This was it, the moment everything came down to. Theodore sat at the defense table. His face was pale, his leg bounced nervously. The jury filed in. 12 faces, 12 decisions. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreperson stood, a middle-aged woman with graying hair and tired eyes. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of assault in the second degree, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. The word echoed through the courtroom. Ellie closed her eyes, let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. On the charge of domestic violence, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. 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 The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed for the exits. Theodore's lawyers scrambled to confer. Vivian Ashworth buried her face in her hands. Theodore himself sat frozen, the reality crashing over him. His life was over. Everything he had built, everything he had fought for, gone. Ellie looked at him one last time. The man she had married. The man she had feared. The man who had almost destroyed her. She felt nothing but relief. The sentencing hearing came 2 weeks later. Judge Chen had reviewed everything, the evidence, the testimony, the victim impact statement that Ellie had written through tears. Mr. Ashworth, please rise. Theodore stood. He looked older now, broken, the arrogance finally beaten out of him. In my 40 years on the bench, I have seen many cases of domestic violence. But this case stands out, not because the violence was more severe than others, but because of the systematic nature of the abuse, the calculated cruelty, the absolute disregard for your wife's humanity. Judge Chen shuffled papers on her desk. You had every advantage in life, Mr. Ashworth. Wealth, education, power, and you used those advantages to terrorize a woman who loved you, to isolate her, to control her, to beat her. She looked at Theodore with something between pity and disgust. Your wife was 8 months pregnant when you struck her. Your own child was endangered by your violence, and even now you show no remorse, no understanding of what you have done. She set down her papers. The prosecution has requested the maximum sentence. Given the severity of your crimes and your lack of contrition, I am inclined to agree. Theodore's lawyer started to object. Judge Chen silenced him with a look. Theodore Ashworth III, I sentence you to 7 years in state prison. You will serve a minimum of 5 years before becoming eligible for parole. You are hereby ordered to have no contact with your former wife or daughter for a period of 15 years. 7 years, 5 years minimum, 15 years of no contact. Theodore sagged. His lawyers caught him before he fell. They led him away in handcuffs, through the side door, toward the prison transport waiting outside. He looked back once, found Ellie in the gallery. His eyes held nothing but hatred. She held his gaze until the door closed behind him. Then she stood, gathered her things, walked out of the courthouse, free. Patricia met her on the steps. It's over, the lawyer said. The criminal case is done. Now we finalize the divorce. How long? A few weeks. Theodore's assets are frozen pending the fraud investigation. But the prenup is clear. You're entitled to half of everything. More, actually, given the hidden assets we uncovered. $147 million. That was the final number. Half of Theodore's actual wealth, including the assets he had tried to hide. Ellie didn't care about the money. She had never cared about the money. But she would take it, use it, build something good from the ruins of her marriage, a foundation for domestic violence survivors, a safe house for women escaping abusers, a legacy of hope instead of fear. Ruth met her at the bottom of the steps. Her mother had been in the gallery every day, watching, supporting, believing. You did it, baby. Ruth hugged her tight. You really did it. We did it, Ellie said. All of us. Bernie, Dr. Webb, Patricia, even Savannah. I couldn't have done it alone. And you were never alone. You just couldn't see it. They walked together toward the car, away from the courthouse, away from Theodore, toward whatever came next. Ellie didn't look back. 6 months later, Vermont greeted Ellie with snow. The farmhouse stood at the end of a long dirt road. White fields stretched toward the mountains. Smoke curled from the chimney. Inside, warmth and safety waited. Ellie carried Charlotte up the porch steps. Her daughter was 7 months old now. Fat cheeks, curious eyes, a laugh that sounded like music. The farmhouse had cost $300,000, a fraction of her settlement, but it was worth more than all the money in the world, because it was home. Bernie opened the door before she could knock. He always did that. Some habits from 32 years of service were hard to break. Welcome back, Mrs. Ashworth. How was the doctor's appointment? Perfect. Charlotte's hitting all her milestones. Dr. Webb says she's completely healthy. That is wonderful news. Bernie reached for the baby. Charlotte went to him willingly. She adored her Uncle Bernie. Shall I prepare lunch while you rest? Bernie, you don't have to. I want to. He smiled, a genuine smile, something she rarely saw in those first years at the Ashworth estate. It gives me purpose. Ellie didn't argue. Bernie had moved into the guest cottage 2 months ago. He insisted on paying rent. She insisted on refusing it. They had compromised on him cooking dinner 3 nights a week. The truth was, neither of them wanted to be alone. They had survived something together. That created a bond that couldn't be broken. She settled into the kitchen while Bernie fed Charlotte mashed peas. The room was warm. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The smell of fresh bread filled the air. This was peace. This was safety. This was everything she had fought for. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcy. Still coming on Saturday? Ellie smiled as she typed her reply. Wouldn't miss it. Marcy had been a regular visitor since the trial ended. Every few weeks she made the drive from Boston. They spent long weekends talking, healing, rebuilding the friendship that Theodore had destroyed. It wasn't easy. 3 years of silence had created distance, hurt feelings, resentment on both sides. But they were working through it, day by day, conversation by conversation. That was how healing worked. Not all at once, not in dramatic breakthroughs, but in small moments, accumulated over time. The first month in Vermont had been the hardest. Ellie couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards made her jump. Every car on the road made her heart race. She checked the locks constantly. 5 times, 10 times, 20 times a night. The fear that Theodore had planted in her didn't disappear just because he was in prison. It had roots that went deep, into her muscles, her bones, her nervous system. She found a therapist in Montpelier, Dr. Sarah Chen. No relation to the judge, ironically. They met twice a week at first, then once a week, then every other week. Trauma doesn't heal on a timeline, Dr. Chen told her. Your body learned to be afraid. It kept you alive. Now you need to teach it that you're safe. Teaching her body's safety was exhausting work. She started with small things, leaving the door unlocked while she gardened, taking walks without checking over her shoulder every 10 seconds, sleeping with the bedroom door open. Each small act of trust was a victory. Each moment of peace was a reclamation. By month 3, she could sleep through the night. Most nights. By month 4, she stopped flinching at loud noises. By month 5, she caught herself laughing, really laughing, at something Charlotte did, and she realized it was the first genuine laugh she'd had in years. The money complicated things. $147 million was more than Ellie could comprehend, more than she could spend in 10 lifetimes, more than she had ever imagined possessing. Now, Patricia helped her set up a trust fund for Charlotte, a foundation for domestic violence survivors, investments that would generate income for generations. You never have to worry about money again, Patricia said. Neither does Charlotte. Neither do your grandchildren. Ellie didn't know how to feel about that. Money had been Theodore's weapon. his way of controlling her. Every dollar she spent had been monitored, every purchase questioned, every attempt at financial independence crushed. Now she had more money than he did. The irony wasn't lost on her. She donated the first 10 million to shelters across the country, anonymously. She didn't want recognition. She wanted women to have a place to go when they finally found the courage to leave. The second 10 million went to legal funds, helping women afford the lawyers they needed to fight men like Theodore. Men with resources, men who used the legal system as another weapon. The third 10 million went to research, understanding the psychology of abuse, developing better intervention programs, training police and doctors to recognize the signs. The rest she kept, not for herself, for Charlotte, for the foundation she was building, for whatever came next. Money couldn't buy happiness. Ellie knew that better than anyone, but it could buy safety. It could buy options. It could buy the chance to build something better. Marcy arrived on Saturday morning. Her car crunched up the gravel driveway at 10:30. Two kids tumbled out of the back seat, Thomas 6, Emma 4. They ran toward the house screaming Ellie's name. Aunt Ellie! Aunt Ellie! She caught them both in a hug. They weren't her biological niece and nephew, but family wasn't always about blood. Where's baby Charlotte? Emma demanded. I want to see baby Charlotte. Inside with Uncle Bernie. Come on. The house filled with noise and chaos and laughter. Bernie had prepared lunch for everyone. Grilled cheese sandwiches, tomato soup, the kind of simple comfort food that Theodore would have sneered at. Ellie loved it. After lunch, the kids went outside to play in the snow. Marcy and Ellie sat by the fire. Charlotte slept in her bassinet between them. You look good, Marcy said, better than I've seen you in years. I feel good most days. Ellie watched the flames dance. There are still hard moments, nights when I can't sleep, days when something triggers a memory and I can't breathe. That's normal, after what you went through. I know, Dr. Chen reminds me constantly. She smiled slightly. I'm learning to be patient with myself. It's harder than it sounds. Marcy was quiet for a moment. Then she said what they had both been avoiding. I should have done more, back then. I knew something was wrong. I could see you disappearing. But I let you push me away. Theodore made sure of that. I know, but I should have pushed back harder. Should have shown up at your door. Should have forced you to see what was happening. Ellie reached across and took her friend's hand. You couldn't have forced me to see anything. I wasn't ready. I had to get there myself. She squeezed gently. What matters is you're here now when I need you. That's what counts. Marcy wiped her eyes. I missed you so much. These past 3 years. It was like losing my sister. I missed you too, every day. But I was too ashamed to reach out. I thought I had chosen him over you. I thought you must hate me. Never. Marcy's voice was fierce. I was angry, hurt, confused, but I never hated you. I hated what he did to you. I hated that I couldn't stop it. They sat together in comfortable silence. The fire crackled. Charlotte made soft sleeping sounds. Outside, the children's laughter echoed across the snow. This was what healing looked like. Not dramatic breakthroughs, just two old friends, finding their way back to each other. Ruth came for Thanksgiving. Ellie's mother had aged in the past year. The worry had carved new lines in her face. But her eyes were bright, her spirit unbroken. This house is beautiful, Ruth said as Ellie gave her the tour. So different from that mausoleum Theodore kept you in. That's the point. I wanted something warm, human, a place where Charlotte can run and play and make a mess. She'll love it. Ruth paused in the doorway of the nursery. And you, are you happy here? Ellie considered the question carefully. Happy was a complicated word. It implied something complete, something finished. I'm healing, she said finally. I'm building a new life. I have moments of real longing. Charlotte laughing, breakfast with Bernie, visits from Marcy. She looked at her mother. I don't know if I'm happy yet, but I'm learning to be. That feels like enough for now. Ruth hugged her tight. That's my brave girl, my strong, brave girl. I don't feel brave. I feel tired and scared and sometimes so angry I can't breathe. That's what brave looks like, baby. Not fearlessness, just keeping going despite the fear. They cooked Thanksgiving dinner together. Bernie helped. Charlotte sat in her high chair and threw mashed potatoes at the wall. The meal was simple. Turkey, stuffing, the pumpkin pie that Ruth had made every Thanksgiving since Ellie was a child. They went around the table saying what they were thankful for. Ruth was thankful for her daughter's freedom. Bernie was thankful for redemption. Ellie was thankful for all of it, everything that had brought her to this moment. And I'm thankful for Charlotte, she added, wiping potato from her daughter's face, for this little fighter who reminded me what I was fighting for. That night, after Ruth went to bed, Ellie sat alone on the porch. The sky was clear. Stars stretched from horizon to horizon. More stars than she had ever seen in the city. More beauty than she had known existed. She thought about Theodore, about what he was doing right now, sitting in a prison cell, stripped of his wealth, his power, his freedom. She waited to feel satisfaction, triumph, vindication. Instead, she felt nothing, just emptiness where he used to be. He had taken 5 years of her life. He had bruised her body and broken her spirit. He had almost destroyed everything. But he hadn't. She had survived. She had escaped. She had built something new. And that was victory enough. Charlotte's first birthday came on a crisp December morning. The farmhouse was decorated with balloons and streamers, pink and white, Charlotte's favorite colors. At least, Ellie assumed they were. At 1 year old, Charlotte mostly liked anything she could put in her mouth. The guests started arriving at noon. Ruth came first, then Marcy with her kids. Then Patricia, who had driven 3 hours to be there. Then Dr. Webb, who had become more friend than doctor over the past year. Even Vivian Ashworth came, a surprise that Ellie hadn't expected. Theodore's mother stood on the porch, older, diminished, nothing like the formidable woman who had terrorized Ellie for years. "May I come in?" Ellie hesitated, then stepped aside. "Thank you." Vivian entered slowly. Her eyes swept the modest farmhouse. The simple furniture, the family photos on the walls. "This is lovely. So different from the Ashworth estate." Yes, that was intentional. They stood awkwardly, two women with complicated history, too much between them for easy conversation. "I brought a gift." Vivian held out a wrapped package. "For Charlotte." Ellie took it. Inside was a beautiful handmade quilt, delicate stitching, soft fabric, obviously expensive. "Margaret made it," Vivian said quietly, "for Theodore when he was born. I thought Charlotte should have something from her grandmother." Margaret, Theodore's mother. The woman Harold Ashworth had murdered. The grandmother Charlotte would never meet. "Thank you, Vivian. That's very thoughtful." "I wanted to say," Vivian paused, gathered herself. "I wanted to apologize for everything, for the way I treated you, for what I allowed Theodore to become, for all of it." "You've already apologized. The evidence you gave us, that was justice. This is something else." Vivian met Ellie's eyes. "I was a coward. I watched Harold destroy Margaret. I watched Theodore destroy you. And I did nothing. I made excuses. I looked away." Her voice cracked. "I can't undo 30 years of cowardice, but I can spend whatever time I have left trying to be better, if you'll let me." Ellie studied the older woman, the woman who had enabled so much pain, who had chosen blindness over action, who had finally too late found the courage to do the right thing. "I'm not ready to forgive you," Ellie said honestly. "I don't know if I ever will be. What happened in that house? The things you ignored." Vivian nodded. "I understand. But Charlotte deserves to know her family history, the good parts at least, and Margaret's quilt." Ellie touched the soft fabric. "Margaret deserves to be remembered for the woman she was before Harold destroyed her." "Thank you." Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. "That's more than I deserve." "Yes, it is." They rejoined the party. Vivian stayed for an hour, held Charlotte briefly, then left quietly without fanfare. Ellie didn't know if she would ever see her former mother-in-law again, didn't know if she wanted to, but she had taken the first step towards something. Not forgiveness, exactly, but understanding maybe. The recognition that people were complicated, that even the worst choices came from somewhere. The rest of the party was pure joy. Charlotte smashed her hands into her birthday cake, got frosting everywhere, laughed at the mess she had made. Bernie took approximately 100 photographs. He had become the unofficial documentarian of Charlotte's life. Every milestone captured, every moment preserved. They sang happy birthday, off key, too loud, perfect. After the guests left, after Charlotte was bathed and put to bed, Ellie walked outside. The sun was setting behind the mountains, gold and pink and purple streaking across the sky. Snow sparkled in the fading light. Bernie joined her on the porch. They stood together in comfortable silence. 1 year, Ellie said softly. It's been 1 year since she was born. A great deal has changed. Everything has changed. She looked at her hands, the same hands that had gripped the dining room table while blood dripped from her lip. Sometimes I can't believe we made it, that any of this is real. It's real, Bernie assured her. You made it real. Through courage and determination and an extraordinary will to survive. I couldn't have done it without you. Perhaps, perhaps not. Bernie smiled slightly. You are stronger than you know, Mrs. Ashworth. You always have been. Ellie considered that, the idea that the strength had always been there, waiting, hidden beneath the fear and the doubt and the learned helplessness. Maybe Bernie was right. Maybe the courage to leave had lived inside her all along. Theodore had just buried it so deep she couldn't find it, until she had to, until Charlotte gave her a reason to dig. What happens now, she asked. Now you live, Mrs. Ashworth. You raise your daughter. You build your foundation. You help other women find the same courage you found. And you? Bernie was quiet for a moment. Then he said something he had never said before. I would like to stay, if you'll have me. Not as a butler, just as a friend. A grandfather figure, perhaps, for Charlotte. Ellie felt tears prick her eyes. This man who had served terrible people for 30 years, who had finally broken his silence, who had risked everything to help her escape. I would like that, Bernie. I would like that very much. They stood together as the last light faded. Two survivors, two witnesses to horror, two people who had chosen courage over silence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fears to face, new healing to do. But tonight on this porch, watching the stars merge over the mountains, Ellie felt something she had almost forgotten. Peace. She had spent 5 years in a prison of fear, trapped by a man who controlled her every breath, believing she had no power, no options, no way out. She had been wrong. The prison door had been unlocked all along. She had just been too afraid to turn the handle, too broken to believe she deserved freedom. But not anymore. She thought about all the women still trapped, still afraid, still believing the lies their abusers told them. That was why she was building the foundation, why she was telling her story, why she refused to be silent. Because every woman deserved to know the truth, that they were stronger than they believed, that help existed, that escape was possible. Charlotte's cry came through the baby monitor, soft at first, then more insistent. Ellie smiled, went back inside, climbed the stairs to her daughter's room. Charlotte was standing in her crib, reaching for her mother, face wet with tears. Hey, sweetheart. Ellie lifted her, held her close. It's okay. Mama's here. The baby quieted immediately, snuggled against her mother's chest. Complete trust. Absolute safety. This was why she had fought. This was why she had survived. This was what it had all been for. A child who would never learn that love came with bruises. A daughter who would never flinch at footsteps. A little girl who would grow up believing she was worthy of gentleness. Ellie rocked Charlotte until she fell asleep, then laid her gently back in the crib. She stood at the window, looked out at the mountains bathed in moonlight. Somewhere, hundreds of miles away, Theodore sat in a prison cell, counting the days, the weeks, the years. She didn't think about him often anymore. He was a chapter that had ended, a nightmare she had woken from. Her life now was filled with different things. Charlotte's laughter, Bernie's cooking, Marcy's visits, Ruth's phone calls, the foundation that was taking shape, the women she was helping. She had transformed, not into someone new, into who she had always been. Before Theodore, before the fear, before the learned helplessness that had kept her trapped. The woman in the mirror now was strong, scarred, but whole. She used to think strength meant enduring, staying, surviving whatever was thrown at her. She was wrong. Strength was leaving. Strength was trusting herself when everyone said she was crazy. Strength was building a new life from the ashes of the old. Strength was standing here, in this farmhouse, with her daughter sleeping peacefully down the hall and her future stretching out before her like those endless Vermont hills. She had escaped the prison. She had found her voice. She had reclaimed her life, and she was never going back. And that is how Ellie Ashworth walked out of the darkness and into the light. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something real, I would love to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Tell me what moment hit you the hardest. Was it the dinner party, the verdict, or watching Ellie finally find peace? Your comments help other women find these stories. Women who might need to hear that escape is possible, that they are stronger than they know. If you haven't already, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. I share stories like this every week. Stories of courage, justice, and women who refuse to stay silent. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Until next time.